Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Bill. Appreciate the introduction. And I just want to start very quickly by thanking Education First and the Common Core Funders Group for this opportunity to share some thoughts with you all and just tell you I'm incredibly honored by the invitation. I recognize a lot of people in the room, and I know there's a lot of expertise and a lot of people that if I stumble on a question, I'll just turn the question over to them. So thank you for engaging in this conversation. For those of you unfamiliar with Learning Forward, we are a nonprofit membership association that advances professional learning through several networks. We have 10,000 plus members. We have over 25,000 subscribers. We have 40 plus state and provincial affiliates. And then we also serve directly school systems and organizations as clients, and we have relationships with thought leaders and policymakers around the world. We're probably most known for the standards for professional learning that's in the bottom box there. You can see the cover of the document that are in their third edition. The standards define the essential elements of effective professional learning. And effective professional learning is professional learning that leads to both improvements in educator practice and results for students. What's most exciting about the standards is that they were developed in collaboration with 40 leading national and international associations. So there's a lot of agreement in the field around what qualifies as effective professional learning. And there was also feedback from hundreds of educators. And the 7 words on the screen represent what we call the titles of the standards. In 2011, the standards were revised for the 3rd time. And on this map, you can see in blue, the states that have adopted or adapted into policy the revised standards. And the green states are still operating under the previous standards as we assist states to make the transition to the new standards. And you can see the states where we have some work to do. Obviously, the benefit of the standards is the common language that we can use to advance quality professional learning for all educators. So let's pause a second and think about the Common Core. And here is the Common Core question for you. Take a look at this math problem. And I'll give you a few seconds to see if you would know how to solve the problem. I'm confident that many of you could correctly solve this problem. I wonder if you think that it really deserves to be at the 6th grade level. This is a 6th grade problem. And many of you may say, yeah, that's appropriate for 6th graders. So the question really isn't whether all 6th graders could solve this problem today. The real challenge or the question is, what's your confidence level that all 6th grade teachers have the knowledge and skills to ensure their 6th graders can successfully solve this problem? And when you think of the question that way, it becomes the professional learning challenge of the Common Core. So the Common Core offers a new vision for student learning. We want to transform the student learning experience. But to achieve that vision, we must transform classroom and instruction, but we can't help educators transform their instruction through the old sit and get and adult pull-out models of professional learning. So professional learning itself must be transformed as well. As a professional association, Learning Forward has been showcasing, educating, and advocating transformed professional learning since the conversation began. And we knew that higher standards for students would mean higher standards for educators, and professional learning would be required to help them achieve them. And this slide highlights some of the publications and conferences that we offered the field to assist with the challenge. But beyond publications and programs, we also knew that we as an organization needed to go deep alongside practitioners. We needed to work on the ground to be able to tell the story based on our own authentic experiences while capturing what we learned and transferring it into products and resources that could guide others through the process. This infographic is an attempt to show you our Transforming Professional Learning initiative that is centered in Kentucky and involves 6 critical friend states, 3 district implementation partners, and 4 association partners. So what have we learned about going deep in Kentucky, about assisting Kentucky and the districts with transforming their professional learning system? This slide represents some of our main lessons. This is our 3rd year in Kentucky. As a result of working alongside great educators in Kentucky, Kentucky today boasts a shared vision and buy-in from multiple stakeholders and organizations for professional learning. It's increased its coherence because of cross-department work toward that shared vision, and it's reduced some typical state department silos. Following a policy audit and regulation development, there are new policies aligned to the new vision that were recently adopted by the state board. A number of resources and tools promoted more sophisticated application of the standards, including such things as new vendor and third-party guidelines, a state learning management system with coordinated resources, a revised induction and mentoring guidelines, and more. What was also exciting was, even though it says identify data gaps, we created formulas that would allow us to measure the effectiveness and efficiency ratings of professional learning, but because of a lack of data, we weren't able to apply in all places, so now the state knows what data it needs to collect. And also the state boasts that it has a professional learning system that will be able to manage other changes and priorities as they come along. There were also many outcomes for the field, because this wasn't just about serving Kentucky, this was about serving the field of professional learning. So as a result of the 2.5 years in Kentucky, we now have what we affectionately refer to as the TPL Toolkit. We have 15 reports and tools that were produced to assist others with their work, including how you develop a comprehensive professional learning system, a 225-page planning guide that is available to people free on our website, like all of the resources that I'm going to mention to you, how you write a comprehensive plan, how you conduct an initiative study to determine where you have gaps and where you have redundancies in what you're trying to do to advance Common Core. How do you conduct a policy audit? These are just examples of the kinds of resources, well, the things that we put in place and piloted in Kentucky and then pulled together so that others could benefit from it as well. We took all of those tools and resources and then we began to share them with our broader network, with our 40-plus affiliates, with our Big 50 network of Big 50 network of the largest 50 school systems, the PD directors in those systems, and the directors of professional development in the state education agencies. We built our own capacity as an organization to support school and states that wanted to follow up on the lessons learned in Kentucky to transform their own professional learning systems. And then our 6 critical friend states took lessons learned through their participation in the work in Kentucky and took it to their states and determined what was going to be most helpful for them. And I'm really excited that last week the state of Washington launched an even bigger initiative to TPL, or Transform Professional Learning, throughout the state of Washington. And they take everything they learned in Kentucky and made it bigger. The work has also guided our work for our members, and most recently we announced a TPL webinar series for our members. So what did we learn about just the whole notion of what do we mean by transformed professional learning? So how does professional learning look different today? How should it look different today? So here's something some of you may have seen that I put in a blog and continue to refine it. So this is some of the refinements are represented in this list. So we want less professional learning based on what educators say they want to what the data tells us they need, what student, educator, and school data tells us they need. From strictly individualized, typically catalog-based, out-of-school credit-driven, to personalized and collaborative to ensure alignment and collective responsibility for the students in the school. And from many one-shot workshops with little expectation or support for actual implementation to high expectations for people implementing what they're learning, coupled with the feedback, coaching, and just-in-time support they need through job-embedded professional learning. So, and here are a few more things. From less episodic, calendar-dependent, we only have these days on the calendar, to systems of continuous improvement and a seamless part of every educator's workday. From success measured by whether people liked it, to more powerful attempts to measure the impact on practice and student results. And from professional learning being viewed as an expense line in the budget to be cut when things get tight, to something that is significant and an important investment required to ensure that every student experiences great teaching every day. So what are my requests for you all? I have this captive audience and an opportunity in my final 2 minutes to share some things that I'd like you to think about, because I know this is really challenging work and your participation is key to its transformation. So I ask you to think about funding opportunities that recognize the importance of both personalized and collective learning, not one at the expense of the other. And because there has been so little respect for the field of professional learning, fewer and fewer funders, thought leaders, and policymakers are willing to stand up for investing in it. So I ask you to continue to educate and advocate the importance of these investments. I ask you to think about the standards as they provide a common language for the field, and to make sure your grantees are using them as a key to their design's implementation and evaluation. I even have the U.S. Department of Education OESE department considering this at this moment. Use the standards when you evaluate whether to invest in a particular proposal. A recent article announced a $6 million PD funding initiative. And when looking at that announcement, I wondered, what evidence does that funder have that they got the design right, that implementation will get the results they sought? The standards can help you. Support innovation, giving a space where we can learn from it, because we won't always have the answers right to begin with. Report results, collect evidence of impact, require the evaluation of those investments so that we can learn from those. And not since the Edna McConnell Clark Foundation back in the 80s and 90s and the MetLife Foundation in the 90s and 2000s has any foundation really gone all in around professional learning. While foundations invest in professional development programs, no one has really taken the place of either of those funders to say we care about the field. So I have to make my pitch for that as well. So in closing, I'd like you to meet Leslie Ceballos with her second class of third graders. 1 year later, she was assigned to teach sixth grade. And I can tell you at the beginning of that year, she didn't know how to teach the problem where I started. But she was smart enough to find a mentor and work with her mentor once a week to prepare for each week's lessons. Today, Leslie is a master teacher in another school coaching other teachers. Her current school is 100% ELL, and she is helping other teachers develop the knowledge and skills they need to implement high standards for her students. And I'm proud to tell you all that Leslie Ceballos was formerly Leslie Hirsch, and she is my daughter. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was really wonderful. Thank you so much for opening us up and framing some of your great work in helping us think about supporting professional development for the Common Core. As we get started, I just wanted to remind people that you can type your questions into the chat box on the left-hand side, and don't forget to press enter there. So a question that we have received is, and this is for Stephanie, what are Learning Forward supportive offerings for school district leadership capacity building to assure that a visioning process exists and supports your professional development?
Well, one of the documents that I referenced was we established the 6 components of a comprehensive system of professional learning. And the first component of any strong professional learning system is a vision. And so in working with districts or states, that's where we begin, by helping them build the knowledge base to create a compelling vision for the role of professional learning in advancing educator practice and results for students.
Great, great. And that question came from Gina Dalma over at Silicon Valley.
I see.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I just saw it was Gina in the box. Thanks.
Yeah. Another question that we have from Gedelia Lopez is, what research was used to develop the standards for professional learning? Maybe talk a little bit about your process.
That's great, Gedelia. We examine extensive research. That's all listed in the back of the standards book. It's also on our website under each of the standards. We also circulated all the standards among a team of researchers, and with our previous set of standards, then we were able to conduct research on the application of the standards and what it meant when schools moved along continuums of effectiveness to show what difference it was making in terms of student achievement. And we have lots of reports that can show you how we measure implementation of standards and the connection of implementation to improved educator practice and results for students. So I'm glad to send you a link to all of the research behind the standards.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Wondering if you can give an example of different funders supporting innovation so far with the Common Core that you're aware of.
Well, if I can say, I'm grateful to the Sandler Foundation, MetLife, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who have been supporting our work in Kentucky, and also familiar with a lot of things that they're also supporting within the school systems in Kentucky, in particular with some of the technology work that's been taking place to assist implementation of Common Core in Kentucky schools. There was a lot of implementation of the LDC and MDC. The teaching channel was one of the technology solutions that was applied in our district implementation partners as well.
Great. And maybe a final question before we turn it over to Expeditionary Learning. Wondered, Stephanie, if you could talk a little bit about the role of leaders. I know that a lot of times we see some direct funding for teacher support, which is really great. I mean, there's a lot of work for the Common Core that's directly at the classroom level. And wanted to also think about, what's the role of leaders in some of this, and how do you think about them with professional development and specifically funder support in that area?
So I'm going to say something, just my view is if you go direct to teachers and you don't engage leaders in professional learning, you're not going to get the results that you're hoping for. Let me say a little bit more about it. One of the key 7 standards is a focus on leaders. Leaders need to have the expertise to be able to support educators in implementing new practices without their own understanding of those practices and what those practices look like. When implemented with fidelity, you don't get full implementation and you don't get the results that you hope to get with your professional learning. Leaders create the culture for continuous improvement and critical inquiry, and they are absolutely essential for professional learning to achieve intended results. Quick story, we were looking I was leading professional learning or facilitating professional learning for members of the OESE department a few weeks ago. I had them read one of the programs that the department had funded, which was and asked them to study the information and determine whether they thought the program got its intended results. And after they read the program description and guessed whether it got its results, most of them agreed it probably wasn't going to get its results. When they compared the design of the program to the standards, they recognized that leadership was missing. It played no role. Teachers were pulled out. They were given great professional learning over the summer. They were given some follow-up support, but there was no expected role for leaders, and as a result, really, there was no accountability for implementation in the schools and no results. So leadership is absolutely critical.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And everybody on the call, just wanted to remind you and invite you to submit your questions as we continue. But now wanted to turn to Scott Hartl, who is President and CEO of Expeditionary Learning, and his colleague Cheryl Dobberton, who is the Program Director there, and wanted to hear a little bit from them about what they've thought about as they help support implementation of the Common Core.
Hello, everyone. This is Scott. And Cheryl and I thought we would complement Stephanie's presentation with a case study of some deep work in one state around supporting Common Core literacy. Before that, though, I want to thank GFE and Bill and Barbara. We've had the pleasure of working with many of you on the call in the Common Core community, and greatly supportive for the leadership you are all collectively taking in this incredibly important moment. And to all the friends at Education First, thanks for putting off this together. And Stephanie, good to be with you on this call. So Expeditionary Learning is an organization that's been around for 20 years, and our mission and vision really is all about professional learning. So our mission is to create classrooms where teachers can fulfill their highest aspirations, where students achieve more than they think possible and become active contributors to building a better world. And our vision is that when learning is strong, adventurous, meaningful, that achievement flourishes. So for 20 years, we've been living in that mission and vision and doing a couple of things. We've been delivering a whole lot of professional development. We've been delivering that professional development to a network of about 165 schools that we work with deeply and implement our full design. Those schools are 1/3 public charter schools, 2/3 public district schools. They span K-12, urban, rural, suburban. It's a very uniquely diverse portfolio of schools. The results from those schools and the lever of professional learning on student achievement and teacher growth is really strong. There's a recent study, a very high-quality study by Mathematica, that shows in expeditionary learning schools that basically if we're given 3 years with students, that in mathematics we deliver an extra 10 months of learning impact, and in English language arts an extra 7 months. So significant results, really from the lever of professional learning as it impacts teachers and kids. We also work in Common Core aligned professional development for states and districts and CMOs. So in the last couple of years, we've been doing some very deep work in New York that Cheryl and I are going to tell you a bit about in detail. We've also been working statewide in Delaware, doing a lot of work in New York City, doing a lot of work with KIPP, TFA, and recently districts like Boston and Hartford have been contracting with us. So all of that is the delivery of professional learning. So we really are an organization that lives to support teachers and leaders with high-quality professional learning. We do a second thing, though, and that is driven by what we've learned over the years. We have gotten into the business of creating high-quality resources. And it's interesting to us that your other working group is on materials. We see these as part and parcel of the same. that teachers and leaders need very high-quality materials to complement and support the high-quality professional development that are associated with it. So some of you may know, and some may not, of the work we've done to build a Common Core literacy curriculum with our partners in New York State. That literacy curriculum is available for free to all nationally through multiple sources, and it's become incredibly popular. So that curriculum has been downloaded now over 1,600,000 times from the state website in New York. 2/3 of those downloads have been from teachers outside of New York State. The graph to the left shows that even when the curriculum was brand new 8 months ago, that in a New York City review that deemed it best of breed, it was adopted at an equal rate to the offering from Scholastic and in the ballpark with Pearson's offering. It's also the only curriculum that is a comprehensive curriculum, not just a standalone set of lessons, that was rated exemplary on the EQUIP rubric by both Achieve and the state of Connecticut, who used the EQUIP rubric. So our resources are part and parcel of a very important side story here that's not the focus of this webinar, but that the disruption of the traditional publishing industry and how teachers and leaders in schools are accessing curriculum and other resources. In addition to our curriculum, we are writing a series of books about instructional practice. Our first came out last January on assessment practices that help kids be the drivers of their own learning and track the progress they need to be making in this Common Core era. We have a second book coming out in August, also by Josie Bass, on the instructional shifts of the Common Core literacy classroom. And we are maybe most proud of our Center for Student Work, which we believe is the highest quality collection of exemplary student work in the world. And we have looked at assembling a body of work that is Common Core aligned and shows aspirationally what's possible for kids when you get instruction right. So what does it look like for expeditionary learning as we touch leaders and teachers? So we have schools in 33 states. We have about 165 schools nationally. Our downloads of our most popular videos, like the Austin's Butterfly videos, are now downloaded over 125,000 times. We have over 4,000 teachers in our schools. They are helping us create these resources. We serve 53,000 students. If we were a single district, Expeditionary Learning would be one of the 100 largest districts in the country. And as I mentioned, we have an astounding rate, a what's happening here kind of rate of downloads of our new Common Core curriculum. So as Cheryl advances to the next slide, we wanted to take a moment to look deeply at work we think will be of interest to you, and to talk about what we're learning from deep work over the last 2 years to support Common Core success with schools and teachers and leaders across the state of New York. So Cheryl.
Hi, everyone. So my work has brought me very close to the field in New York State as we've used the Common Core curriculum and our professional development and coaching practices to really build capacity in a similar way to the work that Learning Forward's done in Kentucky, where we've brought the work, models of this Common Core aligned curriculum and turnkey methods of professional development directly to the field to really ensure that teachers in classrooms across the state could build a vision for what Common Core was to look like in their classrooms. This has been a shift in work for us, as in the past, mostly we've been the direct providers of professional development ourselves. So building this capacity in others to actually turn the work around and to gain a toehold in their settings has been new and really interesting for us in terms of helping others become great at professional development. And in our work with KIPP, we've done a similar thing where we've really helped them build capacity, but we've been able to add virtual tools to that work, which helps us sustain an ongoing relationship. And from that work over the last year and a half or so, we've really had an opportunity to see what a huge change the Common Core is for teachers, much as Stephanie was referencing. And some of the things that we've noticed, first of all, is just there's an unprecedented need. There's no teacher that isn't being touched by the change that Common Core expects of them. And there's a growing gap between teacher preparation and what's actually needed in the field. We've recently received an Investing in Innovation grant from the federal government to explore the impact of our curriculum and professional development on novice teachers. And we're really excited to be able to dig into that work. There's no teacher who isn't being touched by the Common Core anywhere. And so the need to be able to bring those practices to every teacher in every classroom has asked us to scale up in an unprecedented way for us. And so we feel just a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of being able to supply the needed services. Stephanie referenced time as a barrier and a factor that teachers are really grappling with. And teachers' jobs have not changed in any way. They're still expected to be with students for a certain number of hours per day. They're still expected to plan. They're still expected to grade and report out on student progress. And there's no additional professional learning time available to them for the deep kind of work that they need to do to gain what the Common Core asks them to gain. I've spoken to teachers personally just recently who say, I feel like I'm getting another master's degree. And I don't feel that that is exaggerating the kind of learning the teachers are having to do. There's also this question of consistency. Teachers are a little bit confused when they go to professional development and they hear a message that points them in a certain direction, but then they look across the field and they see other materials that don't necessarily align with what they heard in professional development. And so there's a real need for tools and resources that are aligned all the way across curriculum, instructional practices, and assessment, so the teachers get a clear vision of what's being asked of them. I think it's important to remember that this is a sea change in teaching and learning. Although we call the shifts, they're really overhauls, and there's quite a bit that teachers are being asked to learn that in fact is in opposition to what they might have been asked to learn 10 years ago. For example, this big question of how often and in what ways to use complex text versus leveled text that particularly elementary teachers are used to offering their students. There's this big question of letting kids try it first and seeing how they do versus gradually releasing responsibility. And the shift to student collaboration versus teacher-led activity really touches every part of a teacher's practice. It touches their management style, it touches their resources, it touches their fundamental beliefs about how teaching and learning happen. It's also broadening the work that we have to do. So it's literacy beyond the ELA classroom. We have to work with every teacher all the time. Every teacher every day has to be encouraging students' literacy practices. And we need to help kids substantially increase the volume of reading that they're doing. And we've been tackling this for a long time in expeditionary learning, but there still is this false dichotomy of students learning to read for a while and then they shift to reading to learn. And we know that we need to build students' knowledge base and their skills simultaneously, because good readers have strong background knowledge, and the more we can do to help teachers get to that, the better.
So based on this work, and we thought about what would be our recommendations to this esteemed group from what we're learning on the ground and this really deep dive over the last 3 years to being in the middle of trying to help land this Common Core opportunity to be the transformative change in American public schools on behalf of kids and teachers that we all want it to be. So in preparing this slide, I wanted to offer first that it's a bit odd to say this, but our perspective is that this really is a field-building moment, that we are in many ways rethinking, redefining what professional learning, what professional development is. It has been on the outs, frankly, for a good long time, and it's remarkable to see the profound understanding that without effective professional learning at scale, we won't get to where we need to get to. So because it is this field-building moment, our sense as we look at what the kind of questions and needs are that we see from districts and states and schools, that there's some need for some fundamental things. There's a need for one exemplars, the North Stars. Who are the districts? Who are the CMOs that are getting this right, that can inspire and guide others? Those North Stars aren't yet present. They're beginning to emerge, but we need to fan those flames. 2, we hope that you will invest in a research base to convince and inform. Without this will be an ephemeral effort. And thirdly, we hope that the philanthropic community will invest in the kind of tools and resources and understandings to fuel scale through both the formal channels and also the informal channels. And what I mean by that is that while it can be, frankly, a little depressing to think that how are we going to find time? And there are some incredible efforts being made to rethink time, and many of you are driving those efforts. And while we do that, there is also the ability to capitalize on the informal channels of learning that almost every teacher, certainly every good teacher in America, utilizes. And that's this viral sense of the learning that people are doing individually and in groups. And the tools and resources and the understanding of what's effective is not yet fully available to those folks to fuel either channel of learning. That's what we've been doing with the KIP group, and the state of New York and in districts like Boston. Everybody needs those things. So those are 3 things that we would point you towards as what we think the philanthropic community is uniquely positioned to support. And we would leave you with a hopeful note, not on the slide, but to say that when we get this right, back to Bill's opening sense of the teacher report data, that teachers are exceptionally enthusiastic about the opportunity that the Common Core offers to go deeper, to expect more. And when the right support is offered, we are seeing a re-sparking, right, of the kind of entrepreneurial and mission-driven vision of teaching that brought good teachers to the profession in the first place. And the Common Core is part and parcel of reigniting that in folks. So without that, it is a daunting task. But when it's right, we see the switch being flipped to an incredibly exciting vision of what the Common Core has been painting for us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Scott and Cheryl. This is just wonderful. And for anybody who wants to follow up with Scott and Cheryl specifically, you have his contact information there on the screen. So wanted to, again, invite our funders who are on the call, and we have a great number of funders here, and I know that some of you all are really focused on local and regional issues. Some of you are focused on national issues, but all questions, we all know this, but all questions are the right ones, and I'm sure that someone else is asking that. So please, again, type your question over in the left-hand column in the chat box, and we will either have Scott or Stephanie or Cheryl take your questions, or both of them. If there's any areas that you wanted to go a little bit deeper in, or something that you wanted to know a little bit more about, please type your questions down there in the chat box. So to just get it started here, while folks think of their questions, I was wondering, maybe Scott and Cheryl, you all could kick this off, and then not sure if Stephanie wanted to weigh in as well. But are there particular areas in the Common Core where you're seeing some folks really grappling with right now, or some challenges? I mean, you outlined some of the shifts for us, Cheryl, which was really helpful. But are there particular areas that people are still kind of really working on right now?
I would say, this is Cheryl, the biggest change for most teachers right now is this movement away from leveled text, where kids read a good plenty of time on text at their supposed instructional level and instead grapple with complex text. It seems to go away from everything teachers have been taught for the last couple of years around how literacy works. And although fundamentally they believe it when they hear it and they read the research about it, their whole classroom is set up for a different paradigm of literacy instruction. And so everything about the way that they plan, the resources that they access, the questions they ask students to answer, the format of the time is different. And so teachers have to think through 100 different decisions in order to do that well, and it's just really changing and challenging their practice.
So, Stephanie, is there any, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would take just a different problem or something where they're challenged, and it was mentioned earlier, and that's the whole issue of time. And then once they are even given the gift of more time, how they use that time. So just a couple of things. I think there are people in the field who actually have some really good services about helping schools restructure time so that teachers can regularly learn and collaborate together so that they can, in a systematic way, integrate the Common Core transitions into their regular classroom instruction. And one of the resources that we have developed as a result of the work in Kentucky and actually looking at some of the sites in Kentucky is something called a time module that helps people audit their own use of time and then redistribute time to support the professional learning they need and want for Common Core. As mentioned, the Center for Expanded Learning has a lot of great examples of schools that have redefined the use of time to support implementation. And then there are companies like TimeWise that help schools really go in a deep way, re-examine their entire schedule and help them recast their schedule in a way that gives teachers more time and gives students actually some flexible time in the way they experience learning. But at the same time, I want to caution everybody that time isn't the only issue. The second part of that is don't give people time without a plan and support for how they will use that time. Otherwise, new time becomes wasted time. And so the key strategy that all systems could benefit from would be making sure they've invested in powerful protocols, and a lot of different organizations provide protocols to guide how teachers use time during the regularly scheduled time for professional learning. So I caution people, you may hear lots of systems say, well, we have PLC time. And I say too frequently PLC means learning light and more about collaboration. And you need both to get results.
Great. We got a couple questions that are about specific examples, and I wondered if both Stephanie, you and Scott and Cheryl could comment on this. What are some specific examples of professional development exemplars? So cities, schools, also things that are underway in the U.S. and internationally?
This is Scott. I would lead by saying that what's most promising to me, to pick up on Nirvani's question particularly, is that I have never seen in my 20 years in this the more districts and CMOs asking the fundamental question of how do I improve the professional learning we're offering our teachers and leaders. It's at a scale that I've never seen before. It is just everywhere. They're asking the question of how do we get better at this. So efforts like the IPD effort from the Gates Foundation and more and more efforts like this are playing to that need, and so the most promising thing is the scale of this reawakening to the importance of this. I would point, for example, to our work with KIPP, who's taking this very seriously, to our work with Boston, to our work with Hartford, and to our work with the entire state of New York, as places that are just retooling how they are using state and district resources to dig into this work. I would say that it is a time where I think it's fair to say that there are far more questions than there are effective things to point to, which is why I stated in one of the needs that there still is a need for the philanthropic community to identify and document and lift up the folks that are ahead of the pack. And we certainly have some of those that we're working with. I'm sure many others do now. But in general, it's a time where there is a great need for that, and because there aren't enough well-documented, promising pockets of practice that people can access easily.
So I would add to that, and that was a great answer, Scott, because I was thinking while you were saying more people are more concerned about elevating and retooling professional learning at this time than any other time in history, and at the same time I think we have more critics from the policy angle than we've ever experienced before, as well as we get reports that cite this professional learning initiative or that professional learning initiative didn't get its intended results, and then we create doubt and frustration in the minds of policymakers who are ultimately responsible for funding at one level, and school board members at the other level who don't know what to do about the contrast in information that they receive. And so elevating where it works and also giving permission to learn from what doesn't work is really, really key at this moment. I would guess that a lot of people in this webinar could identify their favorite examples of where they see Common Core really working well. I'm really proud of what they're doing in Hillsborough, in the Green Dot and Summit charters, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, work underway in Denver, in Jeffco, Long Beach, and then some exciting policy shifts to support more effective professional learning coming out of our critical friend states, New Hampshire and Utah in particular. Massachusetts has really is attacking the question of how you help school districts evaluate the impact of their own professional learning investments, and we need more people to participate in that conversation. In terms of what's happening on an international level, I think two things that I would take away from that. One, I'm excited to see where we are as a country when we finally, our teachers have the opportunity and will report results from the U.S. participation in TALIS. What we're learning internationally is how we position teaching and learning as a profession, something that learning isn't separate from the act of teaching, and that we need to rethink teachers' workday, teachers' assignments, and the role of teachers and teacher leaders, and the opportunity to think about the career trajectory for teachers in this country so that we can retain our very best teachers in the profession.
Great. Well, thank you to both of you on those questions. Any other questions from folks in the audience?
I'm curious what we forgot to say. There's a lot of experts in the room, and what did we forget to mention? It would be great if those of you listening would share some of the things that we forgot to emphasize.
Mm-hmm. So while folks are putting that into the chat box there, and please continue to do that, and what folks should have said and what's on your mind. And also, one other question that has come up among the group who planned this is just wondering how distracting is the kind of political tension around the Common Core and other efforts. How distracting is that to teachers from trying to learn new ways to teach? And Expeditionary Learning, you all are in New York, and with KIP and Learning Forward, you all are in Kentucky, and then funders, you all are out there as well. It might also be on your minds, how distracting is this? Or are teachers really kind of staying the course and moving forward with some of this work? Wondered if there's any comments on that while we invite other people to submit their comments.
So I'll just say one thing quickly. I think what is one of the biggest challenges in the field across all of our states and our members is in many places they felt like one year they were given permission to focus on implementing and transitioning to Common Core, but then the next year it was followed with new evaluation systems that raised the stakes on looking at their performance. And while they may have been given help in implementing Common Core and even help in how to improve their practice according to the standards by which they would be evaluated, it's rare to find places that integrated both of those new initiatives simultaneously. And so in many cases, teachers even operate along parallel pathways. Like today I'm thinking about Common Core, tomorrow I'm thinking about evaluation, and more assistance in helping them pull those two pieces together is really needed in the field. And then just the controversy around high-stakes tests attached to their evaluation, which creates concern about how willing am I to try new practices, change instruction, be uncomfortable, and then be held accountable immediately on the results of my students. And so just being aware of all the pressures on teachers and thinking about how we can help them transition through this time of change.
Great, great. And I think we've gotten a couple questions in here. I'm not sure if the speakers want to take them. I'll try to summarize. Kathy Littman's from the Gates Foundation, wondering about the evidence of effectiveness in an agile research or agile action design model that allows teachers and districts to understand the effectiveness of professional development around the Common Core. There's a long-standing field problem of how do we know this is working, and how do we create a culture that anticipates and requires that repeat of practice, mastery-based, and not compliance-based learning. Kathy, I hope I got that correct. Scott, Stephanie, any thoughts?
This is Scott. It's a good question with multiple parts. I see Gina's question is related to one of those parts also. I do think that there is a hunger by teachers, and it is time that we help move this conversation at the school level to the questions of practice and the questions of instruction and the questions of how do we need to get better in classrooms. It has been a policy-driven debate in the experience of most teachers right now, and it is now time to shift the conversation to what does the Common Core mean for the instructional change and how do we need to get better. And I hope that the funding community and districts and CMOs, that if we miss that shift, if we don't make the shift to the conversation being about what needs to change in classrooms and let it stay at the level of state and policy and district policy, then we will not achieve what we need to achieve. One of the ways that I would say I would fall back to a slide at the end of our deck of just saying that I do believe people need both the exemplars and the compelling research to say, here's what it can look like when you get it right, and look, there is significant impact. So that's why we've invested really heavily in research. And we've spent millions on research, and now we can say as a professional development organization, we can show you the transformative results we've gotten. We have a $12 million federal research grant right now through I3 to say what will be the impact on new teachers of the combined impact of good resources, our curriculum and instructional resources, with good professional coaching. So our own investment in that is a kind of playing our own hand as to the importance of what some of you are raising, of we simply need to, as a field, generate those exemplars of best practice and the evidence to show the impact. Then I believe the natural hunger at the classroom level that is a pent-up demand can be released to a wave of informal embrace of this change, as Kathy's part of Kathy's question asked about.
Yeah. And then specifically, Scott or Stephanie, are there specific resources that we know about that can help teachers who are really the ones communicating these shifts to parents? I mean, this is Gina's question in the box here.
So I want to add one more thing to Scott's, and then I'll answer the question about resources for teachers to share with parents. So just in reference, and I think you invited Kathy to maybe join and comment about it as well. I think it's how we think about what's happening at the school level among the teams of teachers and supporting a cycle of inquiry and recognizing that we get interim results all the time that give us information about what we've achieved and where we need to continue to learn. I think we can't just be dependent on the summative results, that we need to continue to improve about how we do formative assessments. And there's some work, obviously, from the health field around implementing 60-day and 90-day cycles. I know New Visions has been implementing that cycle in its schools to see about implementing new practices, to quickly assessing impact, determining if they want to go deep with it. And we need more support for work like that in schools and how you implement that kind of model of reform as well. So those are just some of the thoughts. And we just have to be in a mode of, we are always about collaborative inquiry, cycles of continuous improvement. There is no end, because at the end we will always figure out what we can do to help more children, more teachers be successful. I'm not sure if I caught all of what Kathy was looking for, and I know she probably has some really good thoughts on it as well, because she's got a lot of experience in other fields too. In terms of Gina's questions, you know, I know both unions have put together materials to assist teachers as communicators of Common Core. I think Achieve also has a communication toolkit. And what's really interesting is looking at both of the parent sites. So Parents for Public Schools and PTA both have great resources that assist parents in understanding Common Core, and probably that's a way that to help the teachers know how to explain it to the parents.
If I might, can I have a quick one? Do we have time for a quick other answer to
Absolutely.
The parents? Parents always get the short end of the stick, right? And so the answer is always, don't really know anything for parents. And so I wanted to lift up one thing that we have found to be deeply effective. It's not a resource, but it is a way to make the conversation hit home for parents. We, across all of our 165 schools and now across the state of New York, there's a structure at Expeditionary Learning Schools called student-led family conferences, where the student reports on their learning and runs the conference with their parents and talks against the standards. Where are they strong? Where are they growing? And where are their needs? Not only is that an incredible way to drive independent ownership of learning for kids, but it communicates with parents in a way that is often profound. So when their kids are talking to them 3 times a year about what it is that they're excited about, where they're growing, and they are talking about the standards, we then see the parents get on board with an understanding about the standards, how it's impacting their kids, what the intent is, in a way that, frankly, no flyer could do. And so it's those kinds of structures that we believe will build an authentic engagement from parents that can, again, begin to shift the conversation to one of hope and common aspiration from one of policy and sometimes frustration.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for all your great questions, and thank you to our presenters for their thoughts on them and also sharing some of their great work with us. In just one moment, I'm going to turn it over to Robert Sherman from the Growth Philanthropy Network to share some closing thoughts with us. And I also wanted to remind you, as Bill Tucker described on the top of the call, we will be sending out some questions and thoughts on how to judge or think about professional development proposals coming your way, or as you think about your own strategy in funding. And we'll be sending that out over the next week. These were developed in partnership, this specific tool, with experts in the field, and we hope that it will be helpful in thinking about areas to think about in your work as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to Robert Sherman, who with Bill Tucker provided leadership for the work with the Common Core Funders Working Group. And again, Robert's going to summarize on some of what we heard today and reflect on how funders can get involved. Robert.
Thank you very much, Melissa, and thank you to all the presenters for your very rich information that you shared with us. I really like the phrase that Scott just used of authentic engagement, and I think that the real instruction to funders that emerges from this webinar and from what we just heard is really a need for authentic engagement of funders in this new and important moment with the Common Core. It's really a learning moment where funders also have to become educated in new ways of thinking about the education process and the approach to teaching and learning. And it invites us, actually, based on our own styles, of course, institutional styles, to really be experimental in this time. And I think really to, in a way, embrace knowing what funders do well in terms of really exploring the work of nonprofit partners, but also understanding that the moment is ripe with opportunity, and therefore a little bit of experimenting is also in order. I like Stephanie's instruction to us to go deeper. Now's really a time to go deeper with grantees. And just as the Common Core is really setting up for students in a way to expect more. So what is the funder's role? Well, funder's role really is in providing grant dollars and trying to help build the evidence base for new kinds of practice. And we, I think in this case, as we always do, we're going to focus on track record and evidence of effectiveness and the kind of materials that are produced, and sustainability planning and organizational effectiveness. I think what we're also talking about in organizations and thinking about professional development is this is a moment really not for fixed models. This is a time of adaptability, and I think that we heard from both Scott and Stephanie really a lot about how this is a time where different doors are opening to different ways of going about it. Second thing, and I'm going to try and move fast because I know that we're moving towards the end, this is a time also to think about scale. Common Core really offers the chance to begin to work at scale and to get behind organizations that really are able to build themselves organizationally to work in new ways. And that means investing in technology infrastructures. It means a different kind of communication. It means really looking at organizational effectiveness very much through the lens of scale, which we do at Social Impact Exchange in thinking about these things. It's a time also, as we've been hearing, to throw open the windows to some of the fundamentals, to really look at issues of time and what Scott was describing as really a disruption in ways that curriculum is spreading now, and to think about commercial forces in the education field, and the possibility of open source curriculum development. That's really an important conversation right now. Another piece of what we funders do was commented on, and we were encouraged to convene more and to advocate more and to really use the collective organizations that we have, the Common Core Working Group of Education Funder Strategy Group, the work inside GFE that also helped to organize this seminar, and really to come together to understand what kind of influence we can specifically have right now. And I think that if we can engage in the learning partnerships that are available, that will help us take the deep dive. And in this regard, I just want to comment in closing, we should really look to use the tools that GFE is providing for us, the 3 guides and the webinars. And I just, in closing, want to mention the next one and remind you, I think there's a slide for it also, to go to on May 27th, the next of these webinars, really ensuring aligned and effective instructional materials, will be another chance for this community to come together to really help support the nonprofit partners that are working to really transform the way teaching and learning is happening. And we have a chance to do that at significant scale nationally. That's what we've been talking about today, and that's what we look forward to involving all of you in future discussions on. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for participating, and we look forward to following you up with email and on future webinars. Thank you.